People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny.
Washington is fundamentally corrupt. There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Made in America, heard round the world. You're listening to Blunt Force Truth. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with my co-host Mark Young. We got to get some cooler music. You know, everybody's got cool music except us.
I
was listening to Glenn.
Thunder. Come on.
I was listening to Glenn Beck this morning, and he sounds like PBS on steroids. He's got the weirdest music. It goes in and out. It's so strange. It's like somebody diddling on a piano, and then with little wind chimes behind it, and it's very soothing.
Okay, but Glenn's kind of gotten a little strange, though, don't you think?
Really? No, not really.
Don't you think Glenn's gone around the bend, maybe?
Yeah, sometimes well, yes. It's really funny because he was so ahead of the curve on so many things when he was on CNN, when he was on Fox. And then slowly but surely just kind of, I mean, when the whole Trump thing came out, he was so virulently against him. And then he kind of came around. He did come around, actually. But, you know, Mark Levin was the same way. He was kind of and I was too. I was a Cruz guy. I wasn't anti-Trump. I was just a Cruz guy, and so was Mark Levin. But Mark made a giant turn. Of course, now I guess Levin and the Blaze are kind of mixed together now. So,
well, yeah, they took, honestly, what was two non-profitable online television networks and put them together to make one larger non-profitable television
well,
network.
Actually, I kind of hate to hear that because I am a huge fan of Mark Levin. I really am. I'm a big fan of his. He goes in depth where he goes in deep space with his stuff, and he's very good at it.
Yeah, the problem is getting people to pay.
Yeah.
For content. Fox is really working hard on that right now with the Fox Nation model.
Yeah. Have you looked at that? I have not looked at it.
You know, I haven't. They have the advantage of being a news organization that they can have so much on it. So, I mean, they have a lot of content.
A lot of content. Yeah. Yeah.
And
but I mean, it was like
repurpose a lot of content.
The impression that I got, whether this is right or not, I don't know. But the impression I got was this is our conservative wing. It's called Fox Nation. Is that true, or is it all opinion, or what? It's not news. It's all opinion, isn't it?
It's not news. It is more in-depth stuff. It is a lot of documentaries, and you are correct that it's probably more to the right than Fox News Fox News Cable is.
Right, I would just assume that.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's a profit model to try to make money. And I think the other side of it is it's almost a way of throwing a bone to the far right as we see Fox News more and more tacked to the middle.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, that was kind of an AOL thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, that just sounded like my computer turned on in 1994.
We're in a time warp.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show and watching us. I hope you enjoy it today. We're going to talk about Senior Soros. And a lot of people, I always wonder if people know who George Soros really is, what he's behind, what he's up to, why he does it, what drives him. And it's kind of like Saul Alinsky. Everybody kind of knows the name, but they don't really know rules for radicals and what Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and all these people on the left base their theology on, and I call it theology because that's what it is. So in order to destroy the world and the nation, I mean, it's just amazing that people would take this Marxist communist thesis up and then bring it to life, as they did in Venezuela and other places around the world, and call it success and a model for success. But they do, and we need to be aware of it because they are in our colleges, universities, our high schools, and our grade schools all over this nation as we speak, and it's dangerous.
Well, George Soros, we really want to do a little deep dive on him. First off, his real name isn't George Soros.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, his real name is Georgi Schwartz.
Georgi Schwartz?
Yes.
Georgi? Well, Georgi's what, Russian for George?
Jorge.
Jorge. Is that Russian? Is that Russian for George?
They were non-practicing Budapest Jews.
Oh.
His family.
Well, I knew that. I mean, I thought that he was not in Budapest, though. I thought he was in Germany during
They've been all over the place, but he was not. By the way, there's been a lot of claims that he worked in Nazi Germany and he worked for Hitler.
Right. I heard.
There is no evidence to back that up.
Okay.
And if you look at his age, he would have been a child.
Yeah. How old is he?
80-something. Well, let's find him here. He was born August 12th, 1930.
Yeah, so that would have made him, well, close to 90 now.
Yeah, but I mean, during World War II.
Yeah, he would have been 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe 8 or 9, right. Something like that, yeah.
So, I mean, the most he could have even been was a Hitler Youth at that point, and that wouldn't really give him a lot of authority to do anything. Right. Now, what's interesting about Jorge is that he admits, I want you to follow me here. He admits that for his entire lifetime, he has felt that he was a messianic figure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is from his own words, that this guy feels that he has, so I mean, there's something called a Messiah syndrome.
Right.
And this guy feels that he is a Messiah and has said that from time to time he has to do things to keep himself out of the loony bin, by his own words.
Yeah.
Now, when somebody has messianic feelings like that, they're usually called crazy. When they have $34 billion,
they're called interesting.
Yes. Now they're eccentric.
Yeah. Right.
Right. When you're poor, you're insane. When you're rich, you're eccentric.
Right.
But this guy has $34 billion.
It's a lot of money to spread around, and he spreads it. He's got his hooks in everything. I mean, everything bad too, not good things.
Chuck, you would not believe the organizations this guy is in. He is funding over 500 organizations right now.
And they are all far, 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 far left.
Well, I'm going to give you some of the highlights of them. One of the things, first off, people need to understand, he thinks he's a Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Two,
Messiahs have a message.
Yes, and his message is devout globalism.
Mm-hmm.
So he believes that, quite frankly, you listeners are not smart enough to make good decisions for yourself.
Well, anybody with $34 billion would certainly probably have that problem.
You're not smart enough to make decisions, and your decisions should be made for you. And the people he thinks should make the decision are the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where, in his mind, the power should lie. So,
you know, it's very interesting, Mark, and maybe you've experienced this, but I have, because living in Hollywood and being around people who were in and out of the business, who were extremely, very, very wealthy. And I'm talking about billionaires and multimillionaires. I've known a lot of them. And some of them are just not very smart at all, but they think they're brilliant. And everybody around them thinks they're brilliant. And the reason they think they're brilliant is because they've made so much money doing maybe one or two things. And they were able to capture that market or whatever it was and perpetuate themselves and put them into, you know, this giant vat of money that they have. And so they can invest, they can do all kinds of favors for people, whatever. And so everybody treats them like they're brilliant. And in my experience, there weren't very many that I met. They were smart about one or two things.
There are certainly some billionaires out there that are brilliant.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that. I'm just saying, as a whole, my impression, I'm not the sharpest pencil in the box, but my impression was they flew false flags of brilliance.
Well, something that happens. So first off, you can be brilliant in one area of expertise and not brilliant in others.
That's my point, yeah.
So we can look at somebody like a Warren Buffett, who is brilliant when it comes to things like math.
But you would hardly call him a Renaissance man.
You would never call him a Renaissance man. And you would say that he politically is going down the wrong path.
Absolutely.
But he knows stocks.
Yeah, but it probably enhances his wealth. That's usually what they do. These billionaires who are lefties or claim to be on the left use that as a cover for criticism. They can always say anything they want and appease the Washington Post, the New York Times, all the networks and people on the left side of government, and never be criticized for their wealth because they're on their side. Jeff Bezos, i.e., others, and so on.
Well, Bezos, by the way, actually is a very, very astute, smart guy. When you look at one of the reasons that you see some of these billionaires aligning themselves to the college professors, mm-hmm. and that is because they're all coming from the perspective of elitism. They're all assigning to the same model that there is a very small handful of people who have the wisdom to know what's best for the country and what's best for the world, and the rest of society are deplorables. They're morons.
It's the model for socialism.
So exactly. And that's why these guys kind of buy into it. Guys like Soros, Bezos, Steyer out of California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Chuck, let's take a quick moment here to listen to our friends from Blue Emu, and then we'll be right back.
All right.
Blue Emu works fast and you won't stink. This episode of Blunt Force Truth is brought to you by Blue Emu Pain Relief Products. Now, I've been in show business for many years now, and I'm not slowing down, but I can use a little help every now and then. Blue Emu's family of products are made in America and have become a staple in my life. The deep penetrating formula of Blue Emu Original is best for supporting my muscles and joints, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's on the shelf in a blue and white jar. I also use Maximum Arthritis for any arthritic pain and the lidocaine cream for numbing pain relief. Not only do these Blue Emu formulas work great, there's no chill, no burn, and no odor. Blue Emu, it works fast and you won't stink. Available at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Amazon, and other fine retailers.
Back to Soros. Soros didn't grow up wealthy. So this guy did climb himself out. So what happened was he got a bachelor's of science degree in philosophy back in 51, a master's of science in philosophy in 54, both from the London School of Economics.
Which would be Keynesian.
Yes. So he took that.
I assume that everybody knows who John Keynes is.
Why don't you enlighten them just so we continue the story here?
Well, John Keynes is a leftist socialist economist. And the world basically after the Second World War was warned about him and warned about his whole thing, and now if you remember, there was something very interesting because Nixon, when he went off the international gold standard, said almost as an aside, he turned to the mic and kind of went, well, I guess we're all Keynesians now. And of course, this is a socialist model of economics that's all through Europe and actually through most of the world. We are partially an exception to it because we have a lot of socialist things that go on in this country too, all thanks to the left. And I'm not going to get into all that detail, but he's opposed to the Austrian school of economics, which would be Milton Friedman, people like that, a free market economy. Keynesian economics is really a socialist economy, which if you listen to the New York Times and people like that, they're all Keynesian.
So this is a Keynesian guy. He got out of college. He got a job in London, moved to New York, and was basically working in the area of arbitrage.
Which I'm not sure what arbitrage is.
Arbitrage is, let me think of the best way to explain it. Arbitrage are people on the stock exchange who pull various deals together. They pull funds together, pull money together.
Right.
Okay.
So let me ask you this. I know this about Soros. He went after the silver standard in Britain and almost broke them. Why would he do that?
So here's what happened. Soros ultimately started his own fund, got out of the place he was working, got his own fund going. He had something called the Quantum Fund, which was named after the physics theory of quantum physics, quantum mechanics. And he was an okay fund manager. And then in 1981, he actually had a 22% loss in his fund.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people backed out. He had $400 million of investor money. A lot of people pulled out, cut his fund to $200 million. Most of it wasn't his money. So this is a guy, back to your point, this is a guy who had a good education,
Right.
who was fairly clever in the stock market, but he was not showing signs of being a genius.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Well, the more money you have, I've learned that the bigger genius you are.
Well, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart.
Mm-hmm. And that happens to many people. I was one of them. I got lucky.
And for any of us who have made large amounts of money, there was always an opportunity that came up that, as a rule, opportunities showed up that we didn't always make.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to be prepared to take the opportunity. So Soros' opportunity came back in 1992.
Yes.
And what he did is he went all in and shorted the pound sterling.
Aha.
So when you say somebody short something, folks, you can go long or short. So I'm going to explain. Short means I'm going to bet against something. Now I can bet
it'll
against
lose money.
Right. So I can bet against a stock,
It'll lose worth. Mm-hmm.
or I can bet against a currency. So he went in and he made a bet that the pound sterling was going to drop in value. And then therefore, I pay this fee. So I short it. I can short a pound sterling, for 10 cents. I bet against it. And if it drops during a certain time, then the person who took my short owes me that money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Well, basically you're betting it's going to lose money. They're betting it's going to make money or retain its position.
Correct. So he shorted the pound sterling. And then came Black Wednesday in 1992. Well, he shorted $10 billion of currency.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, he went all in. So I want you to imagine you're at a poker table and you're controlling a number of millions of dollars, and you take your $100 million and you bet your $100 million that this currency is going to drop, and that buys you a bet against $10 billion of currency. Well, he won.
Mm-hmm.
He pulled up the four aces. Almost brought down the London Stock Exchange and the British currency.
I remember that.
And he actually forced the UK to withdraw from the European exchange mechanism because it devalued the pound so badly. So what happened on that day? So people understand. So what happened on that day, here's this guy, George Soros. He's running a fund. He's got a few $100,000 of his own money in it. He keeps working. He's got a couple of $1 million of his own money. On this day, on this Wednesday in 1992, he personally walks away with $1 billion. $1 billion.
So let me ask you this, because I'm not familiar with his history. Was he politically active prior to that?
Not really. He was just a guy trying to get rich.
Mm-hmm. And he got rich that day.
And
then he obviously compounded it somehow.
Well, he compounded it by going in on Hungary and collapsing their currency. He did it again.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I remember that too.
So what he found out that he could become this super predator.
Mm-hmm.
And he could go in and he could spot currencies are going to take a decline. He would take a big short in them. Mm-hmm. He would nearly collapse their economies. And he would walk away with billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. To the point where Hungary now considers him to be a criminal.
Yeah, right. And so basically he had a model of destruction and he just continued with it.
Correct.
Because it made him money.
Yes. So now we fast forward. Now he's a billionaire.
Well, he's a multi-billionaire by now.
Now he's a multi-billionaire, currently estimated at $34 billion. And he's a person who admits that he has megalomania and messianic thoughts.
So with that 34 billion, is that his 34 billion or is that his fund's 34 billion?
No, that's his personal $34 billion.
His personal wealth. Mm-hmm. Okay.
You can do a lot of damage with $34 billion.
Or a lot of good. Depends on whose hands it's in.
Or a lot of good. So then George Soros falls in love with something, a concept that falls out of the London School of Economics. This is something he learned there. And this was from a philosopher by the name of Karl Popper. Does that name ring a bell?
No.
Soros refers to Karl Popper as his spiritual mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Karl Popper is the inventor of what's called the Open Society.
That's a big Soros deal.
Very much so. So this is where in college, this is where Soros' philosophy was modeled. Now, I want people to understand, you have thousands of college professors that are modeling this type of philosophy to our students, to our children at this very moment. Not only here in the U.S., but in the world.
Well, let's define what open society means.
Let me think of the best way. It's a historical determinism of the Marxist doctrine.
And it probably involves no borders, no sovereign nations. We're all one collective put together.
Where the power is turned over to a small, extraordinary group of people.
Like in Brussels with the EU.
And it is based on the idea that there are a handful of people who possess the ultimate truth. And that anyone who does not accept the ultimate truth, those people now become an enemy of the state.
Yeah, so there you are. Yeah, it's a communist Marxist philosophy. You lose your freedom. You're now controlled by tyranny, by the tyranny of the few.
And Popper argued that the American founders were wrong.
Of course he would.
That they had, because the American founders had this confidence that there were truths that were self-evident. And under the open society, there are no truths that are self-evident. There are only the truths that the enlightened give you. Think about how frightening that is. Now,
it's command and control. You know, it's basically everything that's an antithesis to the founding of this country and what our founding fathers had in mind. And by the way, it's consistent with almost everything that ever happened in history prior to the United States.
So what did he do now that he got this money? So remember, we're talking 1992, right?
Mm-hmm. And by the way, to define what you're talking about is really more like an oligarchy, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's philosophical. It's as much a religion as any other religion. Mm-hmm. So Soros becomes a billionaire in 1992. So in 1993, what does he do? He becomes close friends to the Clintons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Bill Clinton would be in office in 1993, right?
And they become close friends. Mm-hmm. And he starts helping fund a shadow party program called Take Back America.
Don't you love it? It's always this kind of sounding, very patriotic sounding thing that the left does. Take back America. Take it back from what?
The history shows that George Soros and Hillary Clinton in particular hold each other in the highest of esteem. So even though he made friends with the Clintons, Hillary's the one that really gravitated to him more than Bill.
And I understand that because Hillary's thesis and her college thesis was on who?
Oh, her college thesis was on
Saul Alinsky, rules.
Saul Alinsky.
So yes. Now Bill Clinton, I'm not sure he fell into that camp. At least there's nothing known about that. But she was very, very much on the left. And obviously they were married, they appealed to each other, so they probably had a lot in common that we're not aware of.
So to show you how much Mrs. Clinton was into George Soros and anti-American behavior, In November of 1997, Hillary Clinton actually gave a speech at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the newly built American University of Kyrgyzstan, where she delivered a speech lavishing praise on Soros' Open Society Institute.
Well, all the lefties, the Democrat Party, by and large, if not the leadership, a lot of Democrats who are now going through the college system, the university system, have all come out, and they're all on the left looking at these very, very Marxist answers to any kind of problem. So I'm not surprised at that.
2004, at a Take Back America conference in Washington, Mrs. Clinton introduced George Soros as, and this is a quote, a courageous man. We need people like George Soros, she said, who are fearless and willing to step up when it counts.
And have a lot of money to back it up.
And have $34 billion that they're willing to give me. When she ran for president, he took the senior role in what was called the Ready for Hillary group, and he donated $15 million to Hillary Clinton super PACs.
That's what friends are for.
Now, he has also given $33 million to Black Lives Matter. So let me ask you a question. So Black Lives Matter is supposed to be a grassroots organization.
Nothing is grassroots when it comes to the left. Nothing.
What is grassroots about $33 million gift?
This is all under the umbrella of social justice, too, which is, again, Marxist.
So guess who else he's involved with?
I don't know.
He's involved with Bernie Sanders.
That makes perfect sense.
Guess who else's election he funded? 2006. He was the first person.
Barack Obama.
Yes, he was the first person who wrote a check for the maximum contribution to Barack Obama.
Well, now let's go back again and connect the dots. Hillary Clinton teaches or does her thesis on Saul Alinsky, who far Marxist left, okay? Who ends up teaching the theories of Saul Alinsky in Chicago? Barack Obama. It all ties together with this whole leftist Marxist, it sounds like hyperbole. In fact, I could almost criticize myself to a certain point and say, gee, that sounds so hyperbolic, Chuck. But in fact, once you connect the dots and see where their information, their platform for all of these grand social experiments that they have and what they want to do with our government, it is not hyperbolic. It is absolutely true. These are the things that they want to accomplish with the fundamentals of Saul Alinsky, Marxism, Karl Marx, and people like that. This is where they get their energy, and that is the energy of the left.
So Soros, working under his friend Cenk Uygur. Now, does that name ring a bell?
Saint Uygur?
Cenk, C-E-N-K. Cenk Uygur.
I have no idea who that is.
Cenk Uygur has personally attacked Chuck Woolery last year and Blunt Force Truth.
Really? What did Cenk have to say about me? You want to sink me? What is it?
He said you were a washed-up game show host.
Yeah, isn't it? You know what? I hate it when the left and the right does this. And I'm not going to make this personal, but I want to make a general statement. That is, I've seen the right do this with Alyssa Milano, with what's his name?
John
De Niro.
Voight.
With De Niro, all of this kind of stuff. The right says they're washed up this and washed up that. These people have had fabulous careers. Some of them aren't working anymore. I'm not working anymore, but I'm certainly not washed up.
Okay, but think about this, Chuck. Just to comment on that, Alyssa Milano this week said that John Voight is a washed-up F-lister actor.
Well, the guy's an Oscar winner. Give me a break.
He's an Oscar winner who is currently on a primetime show on Showtime. He's one of the stars of Ray Donovan.
I know. He works all the time.
What is she doing?
Nothing. But my point is they always say you're washed up in order to justify that nothing you say has any worth. So,
So Sink is the host of the show Young Turks. Does that ring a bell for you now?
Oh, yeah. I know who those guys are. Yeah.
Okay. So the Young Turks are funded by George Soros.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Which we can now say that George Soros has funded attacks on Chuck Woolery and Blunt Force Truth.
Well,
Chuck Woolery, the washed-up game show host, and Mark Young, the sidekick of a washed-up game show host. I mean, you think you're in bad shape? I'm even in worse shape.
How bad can it be?
So, guess what they did together? Guess what him and Sink did?
I don't know.
They got together and they funded this unknown communist called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Boy, they didn't get much for their money, I'll tell you.
They got her elected.
I wonder if she'll get reelected. I mean, I really wonder if she will. Even though that's a heavily Democratic, district and all that kind of stuff. I wonder if she's not such an embarrassment to these people that they will not reelect her. Who knows? It's very. Oscar Wilde said something, and I quoted the other day. Oscar Wilde said, "If you tell people the truth, you'd better make them laugh, or they'll kill you."
So, Soros is also the financier, the financier behind Green for All, which is Van Jones' organization.
Well, Van Jones is the pretend communist, non-communist. He was a communist, a dedicated communist at one time. How many of these people are around who have been communists, but all of a sudden they're not communists anymore?
Well, they're all communist unless it's their personal life.
Well, I mean, but Van Jones claimed communism at one time in his life.
So did Hillary.
Not too long ago. Well, so did Brennan. I mean, who's head of our CIA. But they also, well, this is in my past. This is what I did back then.
Okay, but if any of them were real socialists, let's go to Bernie Sanders for a minute. Bernie's got a couple $1 million. Good for him. I'm happy for him. He's got 3 houses. Great. Enjoy them. But if he was a real socialist,
he wouldn't have that. He would be spreading it around.
Right. He would take all the money from that book. He would give it back to the government. He would not have 3 houses.
Don't blame me. Don't blame me. People are giving me money because I wrote something. Okay. Don't blame me.
Right. And if you go write a book, then you can make millions too. Otherwise, you're evil because there is no other way to get rich other than writing a book.
That's right. Yes.
So he is funding George Soros. Now,
write a book.
Or Soros is funding Van Jones. Now, this is really interesting. Soros has now been trying to make inroads into the Republican Party.
That should be the target. I mean, it's really funny, when you talk about Satan versus God and that whole thing. Where would Satan operate most effectively? In the church, not out of the church.
So Soros has now been buying up. He has a $100 million investment in the Carlyle Group.
Explain what the Carlyle Group is. So
the Carlyle Group is a think tank that is made up of former Republican leaders. He has 2 million shares of Halliburton. Think about how conservative that is. That's Dick Cheney's old deal. He is also donated he's donated over $5 billion to the Democratic National Convention. Holy crap. $5 billion.
Seriously? $5 billion? That doesn't sound right, Mark.
Well, it's $5 billion. Let me give you a number here. It's $5 billion to the DNC.
Really?
And other Alinsky-trained radical rules for anti-American socialist organization.
Folks, you do see where we're going here, don't you? That this is the kind of thing that is a constant influence on the left, and what you see in the media, what you see in universities, high schools, colleges, what's coming out of the mouths of our children and young adults and people who are in our government and who are in our businesses. This is the foundation for all of this stuff. It's Soros money. And people like him, like Steyer and other people like him. But he's very, very active. Doesn't he own Media Matters or something like that?
Oh, yes, he does. He owns Media Matters, Mediaite. He owns MoveOn.org. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But what I want to cover here is, so as we're moving along, people think, well, this guy's 90 years old. How much longer can he be around?
Well, his son's also a believer.
Okay, this guy has 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the eldest son is into philanthropy and is on the board of OSF. He's got another son, Andre, who's the founder of the Trace Foundation, Tibetan culture, and lives amongst the Tibets in China. He's got a son, Jonathan, who supports the new election reforms of New York leadership, accountability of government, far left-wing positions.
Accountability of government. What a joke.
And he's managing his father's firm, the Soros Fund. He has a son, Alexander, that is preparing to repeat the dual patterns laid down by his father. University of California doctorate candidate announced that his launch of his own philanthropic foundation in April. Then he has, what has he got here? Yeah, so Alexander's the one that's out busy. So this guy's kids are ready to take that $34 billion and deploy it in the same fashion that their father has been.
Now, look, let me bring you up to date with something, for instance, that you may or may not know. Perhaps you do. This Buttigieg, or how do you ever say his last name, Mayor Pete?
Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
So Mayor Pete's dad was a communist Marxist who taught at Notre Dame, correct?
Correct.
And what did he teach? Communist Marxist principles at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. Open society.
So here is Pete Buttigieg and his mother, the family, his brother. What did they celebrate every year? This is really odd, but it's absolutely true. Do you know what they celebrated once a year? Karl Marx birthday.
Karl Marx Day.
I mean, how weird is that? So if you don't believe that these people are not dedicated Marxists, and if you don't know what a Marxist really is, you need to find out and find out what we're up against in this country. And there's a mass movement afoot now to really take us into Marxism. And they're calling it socialism, everything else, but it'll eventually end up as Marxism. So got to be really, really careful of this stuff. And there's so many people who, the wonderful thing about Trump, and oddly enough, Mark, he's done this worldwide. Trump has kind of opened the curtain on what a lot of politicians call populism, which really isn't necessarily populism. It's nationalism. It's taking pride in your country, in your flag, in what you do, the people of your country, your culture. And he has really started this ball rolling again. And everybody says, well, it's fascist. It's that. No, it's not fascist. It's not fascist to salute the flag. It's not fascist to say the pledge. It's not fascist to love your country. But the left will say it is. But now you're finding it in Austria. You're finding it in Italy. You're finding it in France. You're finding it in Britain. All of these people are now becoming, and Trump started this whole thing. He has also taken the veil off the left and revealed it, or made itself reveal it for what it really is, and that is a socialist, Marxist opportunity to change and transform the country. That's their purpose. It's always been their purpose. And I'll never forget Khrushchev walking through the field with, I can't remember the man's name, his Secretary of
Commerce or Interior?
No, it was had to do with
agriculture?
Yes, Secretary of Agriculture. He's going through the fields of Iowa, and here's the deal. Khrushchev back in those days wanted to understand the strains of corn that we were using because they were so productive. And he wanted to take it and start it with the Ukraine. And so he was asking questions, and he was walking through the fields with his Secretary of Treasury, or a Secretary of Agriculture. And he said, one of these days, we're going to take over the United States, and it's going to be a Stalinist, Marxist, communist country, just like we are. And then this Secretary of State said, or Secretary of Agriculture said to him, well, he said, Mr. Khrushchev, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you from doing that. And Khrushchev turned to him and smiled and said, we will pick you like low-hanging fruit, and you won't even know it happened without ever firing a shot. And that's exactly what's been going on all of this time, and it's coming to a head. It's a pimple that you recognize, but it doesn't have a head on it yet. But when it does, it needs to be popped.
And Chuck, to your point, this is why the left and the Democratic Party hate this president at this level.
It's also why they hate this country. You know, I tweeted something out that got a big response, and it was very simple. I said, the left is constantly telling you, America, that you're ugly. And Trump comes along and says, I think you're beautiful, and I think we're beautiful. And it's as simple as that. They hate the founding. They hate this country. And it's not going to change. They're not going to change their minds. So we have to fight them, and we have to ultimately defeat them. And the only way to do that is through the ballot box. You've got to defeat them every election.
When you look at what's going on here, I want people to think for a minute about faith and religion. A lot of our viewers and listeners are Christians. Mm-hmm. And you know what your faith, how important your faith is to you. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine that faith, that fervent faith that you have was now focused on the open society. It was focused on the idea of communism, of socialism, of there being this one world order, this lack of nationalism, and this idea that only a small group of enlightened people on the planet are smart enough to make decisions. Then you have Donald Trump come along, and he says, no, it's okay. As you're saying, it's okay to love America. It's okay to salute the flag. It's okay to be proud of your country.
Not okay. We should.
But it flies in the face of their faith. This is not just a philosophy. This is a faith.
And that faith is borne out by burning flags. I remember it in the 60s when they were when I say I remember it in the 60s, since I was an adult living through the 60s, I remember everyone who started out on the left in the colleges and all this kind of stuff, and flag burning and anti-Vietnam and whatever, anti-war, anti-everything American, and literally anti-everything American. These are the people now who are in our government. These are the people who are teaching in our schools, in our universities and colleges. They're the same people that burned the flag. Not all of them, but a large portion of them.
Right, those radicals.
Because they're usually the academics.
Those 60s radicals became the professors, mm-hmm. and became some of what's in government, like a Bernie, like a Hillary. And now we see somebody like Mayor Pete, who is now the next generation of this, who was raised by a communist.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to ask people a question. Think about whatever your religion is right now, and where did you get that religion? Statistically, you grew up with it. It was what you were raised with. Is that not true, Chuck?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well,
these people are not, but they've been raised with communism. So instead of hearing stories about Jesus maybe around the dinner table, they listen to stories about Karl Marx, mm-hmm. and Engels and Lenin.
What geniuses they were.
And Hegel. And Saul Alinsky and Hegel and Cloward and Piven.
Right.
This is who they grew up hearing. And now Donald Trump comes along, and he's this big freaking speed bump in their pathway to socialism. Mm-hmm. That's why they're out to destroy him. They're not out to destroy him because he's not presidential.
And he doesn't speak their language on any level. So they think he's adult.
So Trump did something. I'm going to get back to Soros here in just a second, but I want to call people's attention to this. People get very upset with Donald Trump because he calls, Rosie O'Donnell a pig or a dog. And he makes fun of people's appearance and, calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. Understand what's going on here in Trump's mind. Trump is very much a retail genius. He's a marketing genius. When he built the Trump Organization, if you read any of his books from years past, which I have read years ago, his books were all focused on, his business model was to focus on the richest people and the most elaborate brands and the most elaborate buildings, because his position was, no matter what happens to the economy, rich people stay rich. Therefore, I'm going to appeal to rich people and give them what they want. Okay? What Trump realized that when he was going to run for president, he was going to have to take his eye off of giving rich people what they want, and he was going to have to focus on the masses. So he adjusted, he pivoted and said, okay, I'm going to give the working men and women of America what they want. They want freedom. They want tax breaks. They want to hear somebody who talks like them. Mm-hmm. And that's why he talks the way he speaks. The man is not illiterate. He's not stupid. He has a vocabulary. He's a Wharton graduate. He's talking the way that everyday people talk. Mm-hmm. And it's resonating.
There's another side of Trump, too, that I don't think people understand and maybe know. And that is his dad, since he was a kid, took him on every working site. And I'm sure that he did work, manual labor and everything else. He understands what guys do for a living when they work with their hands. He understands it. He's there right on the front line with it. He's been there building since he was a child. And that's when I think it's such a joke when Joe Biden said he's a working man's. Joe Biden's never worked a day in his life, except in politics, ever. How can he possibly be blue-collar Joe? I mean, it just is impossible. And yet he's able to sell it to a certain extent.
Because he actually spent time with working people.
You're talking about Trump.
I'm talking about Trump.
Yeah.
He spent time with them.
Spent a lot of time with them on job sites.
And so there's an interesting thing. When you're on a job site, I grew up in the construction business. And when you're on a job site and you've got muddy boots on and you're wearing gloves and you're going up a freight elevator or you're climbing up a ladder, how much money you have and where you went to school and all those things kind of fade away a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because it's the construction site is somewhat, I mean, you're the boss, but the construction site is still a great leveling field. Mm-hmm. I will like it to something I do and something you do, which is ride motorcycles.
Right.
So you know this, I'll go out and ride motorcycles with a bunch of guys. Mm-hmm. And one guy's a doctor and one guy's a lawyer and one guy's a CPA, and you met the CPA before. And then there's a couple of guys who are from a bike gang and a couple of guys who work on the factory at GM. And guess what? We go out and spend a day together and everybody's equal. Mm-hmm. Because the motorcycle levels everything out. We're just there for the same thing. Well, the construction site is kind of similar to that. And Trump spent time in that environment. So although he's never been poor, he knows how to relate to them.
Let me go a step further. There was a guy who came to town in Ashland, Kentucky. I'm not going to mention his name, who married into a family there. And this guy came to town and he was highly educated, very nice guy. I remember him. I was not very old. I was like maybe 10, 11, 12, and met him, liked him. I knew the family that he married into very well. They were neighbors. He was extraordinarily wealthy. He was very highly educated. And he was on the top rung of Ashland Oil and Refining Company, which is Valvoline Oil, which is now, I think, Marathon. And so he was going to be in this very high position. And he got married. They went on their honeymoon. A few months later, I go to the Ashland Oil filling station on the corner of 29th Street and Blackburn Avenue. And I pull in, and who's waiting on me? This guy.
Okay.
He comes out and pumps my gas. And I look at him and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I work here." And I said, "What do you mean you work here? I thought you were going to be like at corporate or something like that." And he said, No, I work here. I'm doing mechanics. I'm changing oil. I'm filling gas tanks. And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because this is a program that National Oil put in place for its top executives. We have to understand what the daily workings of a filling station is, so we have to go work at one." And he said, "I may be here 6 months to a year, depending, until I understand every working of a filling station." He said, "I know I could study it on paper, but that's one thing. But doing it daily and understanding what this crew's going through, what the owner's going through, what his employees are going through is a completely different kind of thing." And he said, "You know what? I like it. It's really kind of fun." And then he became one of the top execs at National Oil Refining Company, but then those guys made tons of money.
Well, and you don't lose that. I mean, I grew up on a construction site. You grew up with your father's family business, which was not a big company. It was you and your dad.
Oh, well, it was my father and a partner, and it was called General Sales Company. It was a wholesale fountain equipment and fountain supplies business.
Right. So you guys were delivering soda and candy and things of that nature. I mean, you can't get more street level.
I started working in the warehouse when I was 14 years old and driving a truck when I was 15 and didn't have my license because he couldn't afford to hire somebody else. And I was working 12 and 13-hour days. I mean, I hate to do this and pile on and say this is what I did and it was magnificent. I did it because I had to. I didn't have any choice. My father was the hardest work I ever did in my life for the most demanding person I ever worked for in my life.
Now, I think what was interesting, besides for our apparent love of black shirts and goatees.
Goatees, yes.
Chuck and I actually had the same childhood.
Right.
I was driving.
Your dad.
I was working for my father. I was driving a big Chevy step van at 15 years old. I only had a permit. I didn't even have a driver's license.
I was driving the same kind of truck.
And you were driving the same truck.
You saw the truck that I used to drive. We saw
it
in a junkyard somewhere. And you went, oh, look. I said, well, look, it says General Sales on the side. That's my old truck.
So at 15 years old, you and I were both driving around in something the size of a UPS truck with no driver's license.
Right. Yeah.
Because our fathers were too cheap to pay somebody with a driver's license.
Well, my dad didn't have enough money to do it at the time. Yeah.
But you know what? It didn't matter that you became the success you did on TV or that I became the success I did in business because we still remember that.
Yeah. And taking responsibility for what, we had to do. I had to do it. It's like so many kids that grew up in this country had to go to work for their families and do things. I mean, we weren't poor. We were upper middle class, but we had to work for a living, and I was taught that very early on. And by the way, I've done the same thing with my boys. They've been working since they were 14, 15 years old.
And by the way, you and I, this is something else, folks, that I know about Chuck. Every day, you and I wake up and look at the homes we live in and look at the cars we drive and look at the things around us and the people in our lives, and we're still in amazement about it.
I'm amazed and grateful at the same time. I really am. Just amazed.
I get up, where our bedroom is, and it overlooks the foyer. And I walk out of that door every morning. I look down. I'm like, oh, my God, how lucky am I that I live in this?
I will never forget my mother visiting me in Beverly Hills, California for the first time. And I had a really nice house just the next street over from on Lynn Drive, next street over from Linden, on next street over from Rodeo. And I had two open windows up the top that were 2 bedrooms, and she was staying in one of the guest bedrooms. And I was outside playing basketball with Michael, who was probably 5. And she opened the little shutters, and she looked out, and she said, who ever thought that little Charlie Woolery from 3901 Garden Avenue would end up living like this? She was as amazed as I was. But I've always been extraordinarily grateful for what I've gotten in life.
And that's the key to it. But if you ever notice, let's go jump back to Soros to wrap up. If you ever notice, regardless of what they get, the people on the left are never satisfied. They're never happy. They're not grateful. Soros has $34 billion and he's angry. Mm-hmm. What the hell are you so angry about? How bad is life?
Well, he wants to command and control. And if you can't do that with $34 billion, then what good is it? And it's got to be very frustrating all the time. And Trump has to be an extraordinary. Can you imagine how frustrating he is to them? Because they were on their way with Obama and that they were going to solidify the deal with Hillary and then just continue down that road. And Trump comes along as the great interrupter and just drives them absolutely out of their minds and continues to today.
So, Chuck, but in the last few minutes we've got here, I'm going to give people just a taste of what Soros funds.
A list. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't go through them all. There's over 500.
No, it goes almost a football field long.
Air America. Do you remember Air America?
Yeah, radio. Mm-hmm.
That was the left-wing radio network that was founded by who?
George Soros.
But who was the founder? Al Gore.
Oh, Al Gore, right.
Al
Yes.
Gore founded it, and
That's right.
Soros funded it.
Mhm.
He owns America's Voice, America Votes, the American Bar Association
Isn't it
Commission
amazing?
on Immigration.
Isn't it amazing how they use America all the time like it's so patriotic?
The American Bridge 21st Century. Here's one you'll love. He funds the American Civil Liberties Union.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about that.
He funds the American Constitution Society for Law and Policy.
Please.
This is an organization which is focused on recruiting left-wing law students. He has the American Federations of Teachers in his pocket. You didn't see that one coming, did you?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
The American Institute for Social Justice, the American Library Association.
Every time you hear the word social justice, know that that's Marxist.
Okay, Amnesty International, the Arab American Institute, Aspen Institute, the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. What could possibly be wrong with that?
Absolutely.
The Black Alliance of Just Immigration.
What the world that means, I have no idea.
He funds the Brennan Center for Justice.
Brennan, what Brennan would that be?
Yeah, you can figure that one out. He funds the Brookings Institute. Campaign for Americans' Future, Campaign for Better Health Care, the Campaign for Youth Justice.
Youth justice as opposed to elderly justice?
Yes, he supports and finances Catholics for Choice and the Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good.
He must just have a lot of time to spend with the Pope lately.
He is the financer for Center for American Progress. This is the group that is run by John Podesta, the email security expert, who works closely with the Clinton administration.
And Norman Lear, by the way. Do you know who Norman Lear is?
I know who Norman Lear is.
All in the Family, the Jeffersons, and all those things. That's Norman Lear. He was back years ago. That's why you get the Rob Reiner position that he had.
Yep. Funds Change America Now, Color of Change. He is the money behind Common Cause. Democracy 21, Democracy Now, Democratic Justice Fund. He is the major funder of the actual Democratic Party. Earth Justice, Eli Baker, Emily's List, he funds. Energy Action Coalition. He is the funder of Faithful America, which is an organization that promotes the redistribution of wealth and an end to enhanced interrogation procedures vis-a-vis prisoners of war. How in the world do you get waterboarding tied to redistribution of wealth? He is the funder of the Feminist Majority. He is the founder of the Global Center for Responsibility, Healthcare Now, Human Rights First, Human Rights Watch. He is the funder of Elam, the anti-Israel organization that is developed to empower Arab media. He's a Jew.
That's not unusual.
Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, Independent Media Network. Now, let me get to the ones that you probably really know. He's got the League of United Latin, League of Young Voters, the Malcolm X Grassroots, Media Matters is his organization. Very powerful group. He has the migration policy, Military Families Speak Out. Here's his next biggie, MoveOn.org. Muslim Advocates. He controls NARAL, Taxpayer-Funded Abortion on Demand Group. He controls the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund. He controls the National Abortion Federation, the Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty.
Okay, wrap it up.
He is the major funder behind La Raza. And we can go on and on. But folks, National Organization of Women, National Public Radio, National Women's Law, every organization that you can think of that is anti-American.
With the name America in it.
This guy, oh, by the way, Planned Parenthood. every organization that is anti-American, this guy has his fingers in it, bar none. This is, and this is why people, the reason I wanted to cover this, because people
when you
hear
find somebody
the name
that George
Soros.
When you find someone that George Soros supports, you need to not endorse that person.
People need to understand that there are people like George Soros and people like Steyer. And these are people who have amassed billions, and they are willing to deploy those billions.
Just like they would an army.
Yes. And they're doing it in what they call a religious and just war to bring down American sovereignty and to create a I hate to use the term, but a one world socialist order. Soros believes that all of the power in the world should be centralized in the World Bank and in the, what's the other fund I was telling you about? It's the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. Mm-hmm. World Bank and the IMF is what he thinks should control the world.
Well, God is, their money is their God. So, and they use it in a very forceful way to take away our liberty and insert their tyranny. So you just have to be aware of these things. I think it's so important. I'm so glad we did this show today.
It's a different kind of show for us.
But it was a good idea to, expose these people for what they are. And I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mark, for that. It was your idea, and I appreciate it. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure along with the people who watched. And I want to thank everybody for joining us here on Blunt Force Truth, and we'll see you next time.